All right. Well, in these precarious times, we truly do not know what the future holds. As we move forward, what attitudes and tools will help us survive and travel into the unknown? What leadership do we need? Ecofeminism provides a framework for understanding possibilities using co-creative power that has been suppressed through patriarchal damage to women, wisdom, and healing. I suggest, as many of you also suggest, that we need to change our narrative, our stories that we tell ourselves, in order to prepare ourselves with the skills necessary to create and sustain connections in the spiritual, social, physical, and emotional domains. Tending our souls and tending the soils are necessary for lush growth and healing in these domains. We can examine the embedded nature of nature. Children are already born, I believe, connected and primed for compassion. What would happen if they were born into a world that embraced these qualities? Our compassion, connections, and co-healing may need to start with ourselves at a personal level and radiate out as we understand and feel our agency and relatedness. I'm in Australia, and thank you very much, specifically Richmond, specifically UWA. I especially want to thank Tonya Gray for bringing me from the US. I live in Arizona there. And to Tracy for all her work on logistics and her email. And the purpose of my talk is to inform, motivate, and to continue the dialogue. I'm grateful to be here because you all are leaders in much of the research and theory building and practical application of a positive, mutual, and intricate relationship between and among, and however you want to language it, with nature, as demonstrated from the goal of this conference, to share and explore nature. One thing I want to mention as I talk is that language sometimes can get in the way, you know, and then we can sort of pick apart language, and I do too. I love to deconstruct language, and we should continue to do that. And what I also want to say is application, being outside or doing what we do, doing sometimes is as important as our language. So both are important, and know that language won't be perfect. And as I've said to my daughter since she was a wee baby, communication is a process, which is what's a little awkward about standing up here in a sense, because I'd prefer to be more dialogic. So if you have comments, questions, I don't mind interruptions, and when a half hour's over, we'll stop wherever we are. Look at this talk or look at this time as a movie trailer or a way to get excited about it, or cliff notes that we're not really going to get into perhaps the tofu or the meat of things, but we'll get a start. And again, in Australia, I'm with the people who are here and the people that I know, you already know that we need to focus on children, that we need to consider upstream or preventive applications for health and wellness, and that nature and our place and relationship with nature matter. Presenters at this conference are covering a plethora of important topics, including post-humanism, which isn't discussed in a lot of other places. And all of this work and dialogue about sustainability will help move us forward with more deliberation and care. Today I draw on current concepts I'm playing with and from my past writings too, including a paper called The Power of Nature. So I thought that fit in well with the conference. And I recently published a book with Alan Ewert and Jill Overholt, of course, which is about nature and human environments and health. And we, of course, stand on the shoulders of giants and other sentient beings who've come before us. In the chapter about resources in this last book, 3 Aussie women are mentioned, 3 women from Australia, who have been leaders in this area too. Judy Atkinson, Celie Mailer, and Marty Thompson. Obviously, many more could be included from Australia. Tonya Gray, along with many other contributions, did the Australian Outdoor Adventure Activity Benefits Catalog in 2008 with Tracy Dickinson and Kathy Mann. I first heard Margaret Somerville talking about place-time mattering when she was part of the AERA, and I was inspired. In adventure therapy, I've crossed paths with Anita Pryor and Catherine Carpenter, both excellent, both practitioners and scholars. And then, when I broached the topic of ecofeminism, there's part of me that's like, how could I? Because here I am in Australia with noted scholars like Ariel Salhe, wasn't she here for a while, eh? And Val Plumwood, Freda Matthews, Bridget Noonan, and Patsy Halen. Of course, Patsy's originally Canadian. Any other immigrants in here? Yeah. Anyway, I know I've left people out, and I apologize for my limited experience, but I really want to appreciate all of you for your work, and it's been a delight to meet everybody here. I've learned much. So, if you can use anything in my talk, please do. If it doesn't fit for you, leave it. How about that for an invitation? Okay. So, in education, we no longer ought to be preparing people to go into an industrial society. And we probably should have never been preparing them for that. However, now we know we truly need to prepare people to live in a sustainable society, meaning life-sustaining, life-sustaining. If humans are to live well, Western society's oppressive war culture probably needs to change. In critical pedagogy, in part developed to examine hegemony, hegemony still needs deconstructing. Not that you probably need a review, but hegemony, of course, is the dominance of one group over other groups, with or without the threat of force, that leads to cultural perspectives becoming skewed in favor of the dominant group. Even a diverse culture can be ruled or dominated by one group or class because everyday practices and shared beliefs provide the foundation for a complex system of domination. Okay, everyday practices and shared beliefs. Some call human beings the dominant species, and we probably have a global hegemonic perspective as human beings. None of us in this room. I mean, we're special, so don't worry. I'm just talking about them. So, however, as a group, we still have trouble listening to the trees, the winds, the rocks, and the water. It's hard to be still enough to feel others, let alone ourselves sometimes. And what I'm hoping, and what I'm going to talk about a little bit, is understanding on a somatic level the embeddedness with nature. And I think it's crucial to our survival. Everyday practices and shared beliefs, that's a powerful place for change to start. Well, how hard is change? Could you all please, just everybody in the room, cross your arms like this? Can you do it like this? All right? Now, if your arms are crossed, now just please take them and cross them the other way. Was that fluid? It wasn't fluid. It was fluid for some, right? Okay. All right, the engineer. No, just joking, Tom. Okay. It was fluid for some, not for others. That's a small change, right? So the point is, of course, that change can be challenging for us, especially as human beings. And yet, all we want to do maybe is change some of those everyday practices and shared beliefs. So when you're thinking about life and everything or nothing, just try crossing your arms back and forth for a while. And just reminding ourselves that while change is inevitable, that's the good news, it's also the bad news that change is inevitable. So every nanosecond, every second, cells in our bodies, cells in everybody's, everything is changing. I mean, there's just not 1 second or nanosecond that things are staying the same. And that means that there is, in addition to being inevitable, change is an opportunity. I mean, come on, we know that, right? And I apologize if this is sounding a little like, well, Denise, change is inevitable, we know that. Change is an opportunity, we know that. But I want to contextualize it with exactly how much power we have. That there is a constant flow of opportunities to change our behaviors, attitudes, and our values. And everybody else has the same opportunity. The same opportunity. Of course, change is challenging. And some people dig in their heels and don't want to change. But I think that one of the themes in kind of how I look at the world is that we need to readjust, realign our thinking, our feeling, even for little things. And we have wonderful tools, our heart and our brains, probably using them in that order. Neurobiology has made huge contributions. I mean, epigenetics. We're not even genetically set as a being or a species. And we're learning more and more that that genetics, I mean, it's just all confusing right now in terms of getting our head around light waves, particle waves, genetics, etc. So it's a very exciting time. So since change is inevitable and change is an opportunity, well, what about stories? What about stories? My life work, founded on my beliefs, is helping people be in nature and educating people about the benefits of this embodiedness in nature and nature in us. So we have this interdependence relationship with nature, and that's where language can fail us. How do we avoid othering? How do we make sure we can, we might not even have the language yet. And that's why Carol's presentation yesterday was so amazing, because it was living it. And that's really what we need to perhaps do, is learn how to live this relationship. And that way, is better than talking about it. So I'm in the broad field of health and wellness and come from a highly disciplinary kind of place, with everything from a graduate minor in complementary and alternative medicine therapies to training as a transactional analysis person in parent education to ecology. And I'm encouraging all of us, even though we go deeper and deeper into our areas of scholar, that interdisciplinary nature can really be useful, Now, I've done most of my practical work through guiding outdoor trips and then teaching others to be outdoor educators and run programs. And my life work, as is all of ours, is based on the stories I tell myself, resulting in my ontology and epistemology. So it's useful to explore the stories we tell ourselves and make choices about our stories, So I want to also remember Iris's slide about simplicity, that nothing is simple, and that even if we try to be simple, we can't be simple. That whole piece about all the things that are interrelated and all the consequences. Just keep that in mind, because if you ever think, Denise, you're becoming rather simple, it's like, I live that way. No, I'm not simple, but we have to remember that. Now, what about the danger of a single story? So I work with lots of people in the outdoors. When I was a graduate student, there's a company in the United States called Recreational Equipment and Company, REI. How many people anybody heard of that? Okay, yeah, some people have. And they have these big rocks in their building. And so, like many of you in graduate school, I'm like, well, what can I do? Well, I belayed people up that rock quite a bit. I worked in the climbing department. So I used to belay kids up that rock, and oftentimes their parents, and it usually was a dad, would be there. And so just, oh gosh, I need a dad, come on up here. So here I got a dad, and so just stand here and pretend you're belaying your daughter. She's now 5 or 6 or whatever, I know. So you're belaying your 5-year-old up there, and here I am just, no, you're standing there, I'm belaying, sorry. We can't let the dads belay yet. So I'm belaying, but he's such a good belayer. So I'm belaying, and dad is back there, oftentimes with a kid, saying, and let's call your daughter, who is a son, I know, but let's call her a daughter. Okay. Give me a girl's name that you like.
Sarah.
Sarah. Okay, Sarah's climbing. And Sarah's dad is very proud of Sarah's climbing. And just think about a 5-year-old, right? She gets about 6 feet off the ground, and developmentally, a 5-year-old's kind of like, can I come down now? So what's incredible is if it's up to me, I'm like, sure, come down. Touch the ground, and then a 5-year-old often goes up again, and this time she'll go up to 8 feet. Come down, touch the ground, this time she might go up to 10 feet. I mean, you all are the child experts, right? Does that sound about like what would be normal to happen? So anyway, but dad Now, not this dad, of course, he's special. But other dads don't get this. So Sarah's climbing the rock, right? And dad is, when Sarah says, oh, can I come down now? Dad's like, no, get to the top, keep going, keep going. And so Sarah's kind of like, oh man, and she tries a little more. And so, but dad is like all about this accomplishment thing and all about not saying no, right? So I often do a little disruption, and it's kind of fun. But anyway, so I'm thinking about the story that dad is helping to embed in Sarah, right? You don't say no, you keep on going no matter what. Don't listen to yourself. I mean, he's embedding a lot of stories because he has a lot of power to do this. So I kind of walk back to dad and I say, you know what? Sarah kind of wants to come down, and you know, she could go up, she can come down, but think about this. When Sarah is 16 and somebody, when you're not there, is wanting her to go further, do you want her to be able to set her own limits? Do you want her to be able to say no, or stop, or I want to come down now? The change in dad is amazing. All of a sudden, really, I mean, these guys would say, Sarah, you're in charge. You can come down if you want now. I want you to do what you want to do and what you know is best for you. I mean, it is that one of those perfect moments, and this happened more than 5 times. It is one of those transformational moments that we just couldn't stop. And I was like, ooh, I'd like to see what happens when they go home. Because it's like now the kid has the power, or a little more power. But these are the things, that's the danger of a single story, or a danger of not examining our stories. How are we bringing up, thank you very much, Dad. And again, he's special, he's not that dad. Okay, so each one of us compiles stories. And in order to help people change, we need to help them know what their stories are and know if they want to keep them or not. So, self-esteem is a result of stories. What is self-esteem? It's our ability to feel lovable and capable. And it's a combination of our birth situation, what happens to us, the positive stories we tell ourselves from all these incidences, and the negative stories. So we create our self-esteem because it's the stories we tell ourselves. And sometimes people don't know that. And so we need to help them know what stories they tell ourselves. Now, outdoor education. Why can that be helpful? I obviously didn't set that up really well. Okay, self-esteem, it's a result of the story. So these folks are on top of the mountain. Here's just a little thing from outdoor education. We often think getting everyone to the top of that mountain is awesome, and that everyone's going to go away thinking what? Come on, outdoor educators in here. What happens when people get to the top of the mountain? What do we think happens? Come on. Sense of accomplishment? Pride?
Mission achieved.
Mission achieved? Okay, oh, that's great. Now, we're going to add gender. And sometimes outdoor leaders don't necessarily add gender to the mix. Now, I've worked in this field for a long time. Tanya outed me that at least 30 years, right? Well, it's a little longer than that. Thanks a lot. So when people are on top here, oftentimes men do have an internal locus of control for success. Guys, when you get to the top, what do you say? College, what do you say?
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly, yeah, right. Now, supposing, guys, special guys in here, that you didn't make it to the top. What are some of the things you might hear other men say if you don't make it to the top?
You're a failure. Whim.
Well, you might call somebody else a failure or whim, but what excuses might you hear?
The weather was bad.
The weather was bad. Yeah, come on, women. What are we've heard this, right? The weather was bad. Keep going. What else? Yeah, my knees didn't work out. Same. Ran out of time.
Sickness.
So there's always, there's often with failure, not all men, nobody in this room, of course, but sometimes there's an external locus of control for that failure. You know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. Like something happened. The weather was bad is a common one, or somebody else didn't pull their weight is a common one. Now, women who were kind of like added to outdoor education in many cases in terms of into a men's program and kind of like, okay, we're just going to add women, it's all going to be fine. Women, at least in other places in Australia, tend to have an internal locus of control for failure and an external local control for success. Now, the good news about that is if we get to the top of the mountain, women are going to say, what? We did it. You know, it's going to be a we did it thing. And that's great. That's a nice thing that we need to go into the millennium. The downside of that is if we don't make it to the top, most women, and they did experiments when they were allowed to before you know, IRB was there and you couldn't hurt people. So, but anyway, in this case, it wasn't that bad. They had all these women do something together and they made sure it failed. And then what they did is they put each of the women in a separate room and said, why did it fail? And every woman said, what? Yep, because of me. Because of me. So we take it on a lot. So even in outdoor education, you have to be quite careful about the one-size-fits-all, or about how we are outside in nature. And that's just, yeah, a little thing about the locus of control. There's internal and external, depending on success and failure, too. So, outdoor education, even with that piece of it, is well positioned because there's novelty, nature, engagement, immersion, openness, attunement, well positioned for transforming, for transformations to happen, for helping people change their stories. And the reason why I did the first example about the internal locus of control for success or failure, etc., is because it doesn't just happen automatically, and we have to be thoughtful about it as leaders. But we do have an incredible environment in the outdoors to help people rewrite stories, to help people create stories, to co-create stories together so that we can help as we go into this new millennia. All right, 20 minutes down, 10 to go. Another thing that I might talk about is in this whole deconstructing piece, is we're going into, and you know what, I didn't pronounce this the same as you before I got here. I would call it the Anthropocene, but y'all call it the Anthropocene. Okay, I got that now, the Anthropocene. So as we're going into this Anthropocene, and you know, even Paul and his folks, you know, who coined that word, are wondering, when did it start? Did it really start yet? All this stuff. Well, goodness gracious, it's easier to say, why don't we just decide to change the story and say we're going into the age of nature? I don't know. Just a thought, throw it out there, because the Anthropocene is a little hard to say. All right, not just because of that. So I've situated the story thing, I've situated the outdoor piece, and in addition to doing things like rock climbing, we can be quiet in nature. I mean, nature is not about, or outdoor education, about doing necessarily. Remember, in child development, I love you when you're quiet, and I love you when you're active. You know, we have to, you know, I came from the generation that our parents loved us when we were doing and achieving. And it made a bit of a mess out of the baby boomers. But then there's the people after us. All right, so far we've gotten to change is inevitable, but it can mean opportunity. We've gotten to we are our stories, outdoor ed is positioned well, and who knows, maybe we're moving into the age of nature. A couple more little things. Our talks are teasers, cliff notes, more coming later. And, oh yes, when I got here, a travel size of contact lens, $2.95 in the US. Here, $14.95. I'm still looking for my bottle of contact lens solution. Okay. All right. Did you know that about 50,000 years ago, there were lots of flutes made, carved, and lots of carvings, female carvings. Now, sadly, the patriarchal society calls these Venus carvings. They want to sort of sexualize and you know, heterosexualize most things. But they are female carvings, and they are often about, the archaeologists have said, relating Earth to Gaia. And during that time, up until about 10,000 years ago, there seemed to be a very oneness and connection with nature. In fact, they had a lot of free time. There was a lot of regenerativity, just given what little evidence we find and things like that. Now, juxtapose this with how some people now think war is inevitable. Even Kurt Hahn, who's big in outdoor education, drew from William James, and he said that war satisfied a primitive longing in men, which will never be extinguished. You know, he doesn't even like peace. It's like, wait a minute, guess what? Warfare is a pretty recent phenomena, according to archaeological evidence. When did warfare start? Does anybody know? On some sense where they can really find it? Holler number. Hurry up, we got 6 minutes. 3,000 years ago? What else? More. 10,000? Actually, it is about 7,000 years ago. I mean, they found one thing maybe about 17,000 years ago, but it's only like 7,000 years where they start seeing things. And of course, we want to refrain from saying, oh, it's because of agriculture. Oh, it's because we started living in groups. Oh, it's because, I don't know why it is. And I think the stories that we tell ourselves about warfare are amazing because it continues warfare. I mean, we have so solidly positioned ourselves that war is inevitable. Oh, none of us in this room, I know that. But out there, enough people have. Well, this impacts outdoor education and many other endeavors. So as outdoor leaders, some of you in this room, or as people who go outside, we want to figure out, I encourage us to how we can change that story, that we're not at war with nature. War and competition and that collision are not inevitable. In fact, we used to play the flute and draw and carve things and have a lot of time to hang around. Although we did, in 24 hours, usually walk about 8 hours. And that's better than sitting for 6 hours, right? All right. So, where does ecofeminism fit in? Well, we went to the industrial society, technology society, and now, basically, we have a pervasive fear and mistrust of the natural world. And that's so good. Ecofeminism comes from the Greek word, of course, ecos, house, life, household of life. And I think that when we merge feminist principles and ecological principles to sort of mediate or reform our relationship with nature, then it fosters that sense of belonging within rather than being control of community and life. So there'll be more about that in the written part. This is kind of similar to Ellen Swallows. I'm just going to mention a couple of people that everybody's heard of her, right? Put your hand up. Did you know that she was a person, probably, the first person to sort of use the word ecology. And it was all about living with our environment. And it was all about understanding the health and wellness about being with our environment. Well, she was dissed for a long time. But now MIT in the United States, what does MIT stand for?
Massachusetts.
Yeah, Institute of Technology, that MIT school. They have a whole wall about her. The founder of ecology, da-da-da-da. And of course they want to do that, mother-father thing, which I talked with some of you about. But she did. Now people want to claim her because she was incredible. But very few people know that she was quite an international figure and used the word ecology. And the same with this woman, Marina Elwood, for those of you in the outdoor folks, here's a picture of her, and she co-founded this Salam school and initiated the whole expeditionary concept with the outdoor stuff. All right, now we're going to move on. What you can look at in some of the writings are the fields engaged in research. This was some of my research, about 24 fields that really look at the research in this area of spending time outside. People have researched gardening, outdoor pursuits, wilderness trips, sitting, walking, playing. Research settings are very varied, from natural areas to different densities to built environments in terms of that. This is just a teaser about, there is a lot of research about the relationship between health and wellness and being in nature. And these are some of the outcome measures, and so you can look at that. So why is it important to spend time in the outdoors? Well, Keller would say, healthy maturation and development, it's imperative to spend time outdoors. Certainly a sense of spirituality, and the spiritual part is just one area besides the physical, emotional, social that happens when you're in the outdoors. That sense of connectedness and belonging, that peace of mind. How about women? Create a positive body image. This is very important coming up. I don't know how it is here, but in the US, we have this focus on thin. But we have figured out that if people exercise in the outdoors, it's a lot different even than exercising indoors. In fact, when we were talking about getting to the top of the mountain or whatever, for women, being physically effective, like having that time outside to be physically effective, leads them to believe that that's so important that their body image changes. And that's been incredibly wonderful research to be part of. So they changed what it means to be attractive, and they changed what it means to think about body image. We've also looked a little bit, because the world of science wants to know inoculation, dosage, and actually we figured out with a larger sample that if a woman spent 2 weeks at a summer camp or 2 weeks camping outside, some point in her life, her body image is significantly higher than the average. That was kind of interesting. And then if you want to continue this, if women spend 3 hours a week being active, doing something, we're talking walking, bird watching, you don't have to be climbing Denali, although you could, because that's kind of fun too. 3 hours a week, this group has significantly better body image than women who don't spend 3 hours a week outside. So again, if we start that habit in school, that would be great. One group was 6 months inside at a residential treatment center. One group 6 months outside, ate the same, played the same. The outside lost more weight. So then we just have pretty pictures. Finally, we need to acknowledge that we have stories. Examine our stories. Lead with connections, compassion, and choice to encourage the co-healing. And then be a role model. This kiddo is like, my mommy climbs rocks, guess I'll climb rocks. It's kind of the way it happens. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah. Look, I think we'll allow for you 2 quick questions, if that's okay. While Catherine, if you'd like to make your way down, we'll do a smooth transition in the time that we've got. So, I'll hand it back to Denise. Questions?
And if you're thinking of a question, we have the Journal of Sustainability Education at Prescott. It's an open source journal about sustainability, and you may want to submit things for publishing. So one, you can look at it, and two, that. So I have a few of these markers up here too. But it's open source, so that means free. No questions?
Or are you just letting that wash over you, are you?
That's very interesting to me, because I'm sure, the things that go wrong for little girls, I think the gender dimension is really important, and the things that go wrong for little girls, I can see elements of it in looking at my own story. And I was thinking about, where you can't go a little way and then come down and set your own limits. Oh, geez, I wish I'd had different teachers in phys ed at school. But I was thinking about, so in the world, you know, as adults, in various different community bushwalking clubs I've had moments of association with, that incredible competitiveness of who can make the track, volunteers who make the track harder and longer and stronger and a higher rating than the one that was a fortnight ago. You know, it's a real, has been an incredible disincentive for, especially for women who are not hugely confident in the bush. There are just so many exclusionary forces and pressures, it seems to me, for people who might be wanting to be more systematically engaged in the outdoors.
Absolutely.
And it's very masculinist often.
Yeah, often it still is very masculinist, and I think it hurts everyone, because I know in the U.S. the greatest risk of dying are guys between about 16 and 25, and it's usually accidents because they can't say no either, and can't stop and can't slow down. So I mean, it hits both genders. So anyway, yeah. Anything else?
David, last question. Thank you.
Just on your comment on war starting 70,000 years ago, and you asked the question, when did war start? It didn't change my mind. It started when I started fighting with my big brother. That's my consciousness of it. So I'm just wondering, the difference between aggression and war. You sort of said something, I'm a bit confused by it's a large statement, and when I think of it, I get, what's the relation between what's your about war and what's your about sort of aggression or conflict?
Yeah, that's a whole bigger subject, and I think that is the piece that world peace starts at home, right? World peace starts at home. And I think that because we're so ingrained into a war culture, we look at our kiddos and we said, siblings fight, and we say this happens and this happens. If we look at animal behaviorists, they talk about the competing for the mate and this and that. In the 70s, a woman wrote a book called Eve's Rib. She took the exact same data and flipped everything around.